Hello and welcome to Hilltop Podcast, and I am Tony Alvarado, your facilitator. We look forward to having a podcast that is by, of, and for students. I think we're ready to get started with our first guest. It is really my pleasure, distinct privilege, to introduce a former student, now an entrepreneur in the Austin area, who I will tell you has really surprised and amazed all of us. Not that we doubted that he would not be a success, but rather how he has really engaged his passion and implemented his entrepreneurial goals. And I'm speaking about Jake Lane. And I think no better introduction than to say, I have learned a lot from Jake these last few years that I have used in my classes when I taught in the entrepreneurship program, particularly when he was a guest speaker. I still remember when he was in one of my classes and we had, and I think you will recall this, Jake, two ladies who had started a travel agency, JB Journeys, there you go, and after they completed that first presentation, I then found out that they hired Jake to help them put something online, put something together, and I'm going, he's already doing what we are telling them they're going to do after they graduate. So this is my way of saying congratulations, Jake. Thank you for being with us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, what you do, and really who Jake Lane is.
Sure. Yeah. Excited to be here. Awesome to be back on campus. It's been too long. I'm Jake. I currently lead growth and marketing for a company called Captain Experiences. We're in the outdoor travel space. So we're primarily building a dual-sided marketplace in the hunting and fishing industry, guided hunting and fishing trips to begin our journey. And, we're progressing to be the largest outdoor, travel vendor marketplace in the U.S. and abroad. So I joined them in November. Really excited to help them grow, and that's kind of where I've fell into lately. I've always kind of been an entrepreneur since I guess forever. My family is full of entrepreneurs. My dad has started his own home improvement company back in Houston when I was growing up, and I kind of took from that and said, man, I want to kind of do the same thing. I think that's how I ultimately fell into the entrepreneurship department at St. Ed's. And
well, thank you for sharing that. And there's a lot of information there that I want to unbundle a little bit, and hopefully our audience will follow the journey and navigate with us a little bit. So first, let's talk about what got you into the entrepreneurship space to begin with. Did you find as a younger person going through school that somebody said to you, hey, you can start a business, or hey, Jake, you're a pretty creative person? Where did the feedback come that validated this entrepreneurial journey that you're on now? Where did you get that motivation? How did it come about? I noticed you mentioned your dad and the family, and that obviously has some impact, but was there anything else?
I wish I could say there was something that was just like this defining moment. I think for me, unfortunately, I like to break the mold. I don't like to do what I'm told, and I think the general path is like, hey, go to school, get a big job at a large company that's safe and secure, and I just wanted to forge my own path instead.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes students will say, when I ask them, why did you choose entrepreneurship? And they'll say, well, because it was the easiest major I could take, or there were a lot of fun people taking that course, and I just felt like it was something that I would want to do, and at the same time be able to attend all the concerts and other activities in Austin while I was there. But you actually came about doing this because you were interested in being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think so. I think naturally I think there's just like sexy element to entrepreneurship, or the idea of entrepreneurship. But at the root for me, it's the ability to, really have big swings and problem solve. I love problem solving, and entrepreneurship really allows for that. There's a lot of grit and I guess really unsexiness to it that I actually love that most people don't.
And so when somebody says to you, you need to have an entrepreneurial mindset to be an entrepreneur, one, do you really need it? And two, what is it?
I don't know. I don't think there's like I think that's a loaded question by definition. I think you have to be willing to really understand the risks and potential for failure. I think you have to be okay with a lot of that. So I don't think there's really an entrepreneurial mindset. I think there's somebody who's just determined to really break the mold.
And how do you think St. Edward's geared you in the direction of where you're going now? Is the education here more experiential? Is it because it's located in an innovation cluster called Austin? What distinguishes a Hilltopper from going to another university? And there's several of them in town, including this pretty big one across the north of the Colorado River.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, one thing that I loved about St. Ed's is you're not just a number. And I think that's such an obvious thing for a lot of people to say about smaller schools. But it really felt like, even when I was visiting campus, that it was really going to be a really good fit and naturally progress me to the place that I wanted to be outside of these big schools. And I think, funny enough, I don't think UT at the time that I went to school even had an entrepreneurship program or any of these other ones. I think even A&M's popped up well after I'd left. So I think, it was just kind of a defining moment for me where I was like, hey, this is an awesome opportunity for me to get into the entrepreneurship major, understand every facet of business. And yeah, St. Ed's just felt great. Plus, to your point, Austin's a really good market to do this in.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned what you did about not that many schools had an entrepreneurship major, because a trivial pursuit kind of question is St. Ed's was really one of the first small liberal arts Catholic institutions that established an entrepreneurship major. And it came about, as I recall, because by the time I joined the faculty, it was already established. It came about as a result of a grant that had been extended by the Kaufman Foundation in Kansas City, and it was back in the 2004-2003 time period. And by the time I came on board in 2010, it was fully established. And that is a really big high watermark, in my opinion, for a school like St. Ed's to have an entrepreneurship major when, in fact, academia initially frowned on entrepreneurship as a major because they could understand the disciplines of accounting or the disciplines of computer science or any of the other traditional majors. They just couldn't understand entrepreneurship. That's like vocational ed courses. I mean, what does that mean? Well, there's actually a discipline, and St. Ed's can claim credit that it was there as one of the first. So thank you for pointing that out. So let's move on to what I call the when or what question, and that is, what have you seen as changes from the time you left St. Ed's, and even from just a few years ago when you were involved in other ventures that has made the landscape different, maybe more challenging, maybe easier, maybe more confusing?
Yeah. When we first started talking about this podcast, I kind of mentioned, I kind of came up in, my entire class did, those who kind of joined the ranks within the, 2010 to 2014 years, kind of had a unique ability to see Austin really grow from what it was to what it is today. And so, I think for me, there's a lot, and I can go, on for hours about the changes that have occurred both in the city and from the more strategic entrepreneurship side of the world. But, it was when I first got here, it was, Capital Factory was kind of in its infancy as well. And it was, you could go up there and hang out and almost not see anybody. Now you go up there and it's completely loaded with people, and they've got a Dallas branch, and every city's got their own kind of incubator. So the space has really, really opened up and become a little bit easier to access in terms of information and getting started. But it's also become a little bit harder to actually get that capital that you need, just because of the amount of people that have come into the space, or people trying to get into that capital, access that capital, especially with today's macro environment.
And I think what's really special, if I can glean from your conversation about St. Ed's, is because it is smaller and because there is a concentration on the student, that the students themselves peer-to-peer might find it easier to develop a good network of friends that they can partner with, that they can team up with. And that is part of that secret sauce of entrepreneurship, is as much as the passion and the grit is that of the entrepreneur, you always have a team with you. And the team could be your support group, your family, inner circle of friends. It could be your network, as you mentioned, the incubators and the accelerators where you might find others of like-mindedness. But ultimately, how do you go about staying fresh and getting and staying connected?
Obviously what I'm trying to accomplish, but yeah, I think I always say, the city of Austin is a massive small city. Like, it's kind of weird to say, but everybody knows everybody, despite the fact that there's a ton of population growth. And so, and what I mean by that is there's a lot of us staying connected, everything else, but I'm still close with a lot of those that, including you, right? It's funny to say the St. Ed's network. How many people are still sitting with their professor and having conversations and have that kind of relationship? So that's really awesome. But even just the classes, the small classes here allow me to stay fresh with all of our all those that graduated. Even I met my best friend Travis Wilson sitting in the freshman year class, and him and I have gone to start a nonprofit together. And so it's really good to I think St. Ed's inspired a lot of us to kind of stay connected.
Well, that's a great answer, and maybe that's a way of highlighting, if you will, some of the ventures that you have been involved with. Perhaps not all of them were as successful as you might have wanted, but can you take our students through sort of a short autobiographical overview of some of the companies that you've been involved with, that you have started, and the pivots and maybe iterations that have taken place that hopefully you have built on and have got you to where you are today?
Yeah. I can take it all the way back to when I was in school, and I had a couple of different ventures that were going, some more successful than others. Obviously the one of is Brew Cupid, which was kind of the quintessential online ordering your own coffee back when organic coffee was really hot, and we were trying to get the kind of subscription-based coffee off the ground. We kind of found quickly that it was a very marginalized business, as you can imagine, when you're private labeling. So quickly, I won't call failed it, but let that one run. And in tandem with Brew Cupid, I was also running 2 eBay businesses while I was in school, which I actually made more money on than any of my other things that I did, which were both in the hunting and golf space. But it got me into my online, marketing career, right? And understanding the merchandising of eBay allowed me to really transcend into the other roles that I was going to have. From there, I quickly left school and went to work for a big company. I was like, hey, maybe this entrepreneurship stuff isn't for me. Let's go try something out. And went and worked at a company down the road called Spiceworks, which is an IT company, and it was helping them get their affiliate marketing program off the ground. And I lasted about 6 months, and I was like, no, I do not like this. The bureaucracy is insane. You'd email somebody to get something done, and they'd tell you to email somebody else, and it would just keep getting punted down the road. And And so I went and jumped over to a startup called Lawn Starter, which is a online marketplace for lawn care and lawn services. They've since gone to grow to massive levels and acquired a couple of their competitors. Got really successful. And then I went and kind of dabbled around in some other startups. One was Press Cleaners, where we were building an on-demand laundry and dry cleaning business, where we were basically enlisting the help of all these different mom and pop dry cleaners and laundry businesses that, highly fragmented marketplace.
So let me stop you there.
Yep.
At what point did the pandemic occur, and how did you pivot to accommodate that once in a lifetime change that nobody ever anticipated?
Pandemic occurred right when I was, we were starting a company called New Breaks, which is where I was at previous to Captain. And we, I think we were about a year into business when the pandemic hit. And we were actually super fortunate, where we were able to accelerate our growth in times of, where a lot of other businesses weren't able to. We had just raised some capital, and we're able to essentially ride the wave of other businesses not buying media, and allowed us to really get into the space, grow like crazy, and people still had to drive. So, and it was a mobile auto repair space or company, and so we were in that space and kind of had I'll call it a COVID-proof business model to it.
Bingo. And I think that's part of that serendipitous occurrence that entrepreneurs need to look for, that opportunity recognition. And so let me digress a little bit. And when I say go off script, it's not something that I had prepared you for in terms of conversation, but I think conversations are about, hey, this is something that just strikes my funny bone, and let's talk about it. Little of what I glean from media and my own experience is that we're still looking for that new normal post-pandemic. We really don't know, is everybody coming back to work in the physical space that they were before? It appears that that's not going too well for a lot of the big office buildings in downtowns. But the other is that people have gotten used to the fact that, hey, I don't need to go into that restaurant that has, Michelin star food. I can actually order and pick up or have it delivered. Where do you see those trends going from your perspective, Jake? Is that something that a student sitting in a classroom at St. Edward's University should be looking at? Or how do you get up to speed on what's going on out there where there's some niche or two that you can pursue?
Yeah, I think the issue I find in a lot of this is that the space is changing so rapidly. And I think COVID kind of inspired an increase in speed of change, as weird as that is to say. And yeah, I think, there's a lot of really solid resources out there online that, my favorite thing is just quick, digestible newsletters. Depends on the space that you're in. Find those that you care about and, get those into your inbox and jump through those in the morning. And that's probably the easiest way to really access that information.
Excellent. And when does that main hustle and when does that side hustle kind of merge? If you know what I mean. You were describing several businesses that you started while you were in school, and obviously your main hustle was staying in school and graduating. Mm-hmm. But for entrepreneurs that start a business, they're going to have a day job, so to speak, because they still need to pay the rent and the mortgage and have some food on the table while they're exploring all these opportunities. So when and how do you think that side hustle becomes the main hustle? What's the point that you reach? Is it revenue data that tells you it's time? Is it getting partners that all of a sudden now allow you to leverage more resources, or you read the tea leaves? What's the key or keys to that?
Survivability, right? And I think that's a standard in which it really depends on where you're at in life, right? If you're in college, your level of survivability or your ability to survive is a little bit easier than those with families and everything else trying to start up. So, I think it's whenever you feel comfortable enough to, one, pay the bills. That's the most important part, right? You can't run a business and default on your mortgage. So I think it's really understanding that financial model for your business and understanding, what's that timetable to get to where you're comfortable and able to pay those bills and continue to grow without, too much friction involved.
So the bottom line is you need to be able to survive, and without that, everything else sort of starts collapsing around you.
Yeah, it's distractions, right? Like if you can't stay focused on what you need to, you're not going to be a great entrepreneur. So get to the point where you can survive and be able to focus on what you need to execute and get that business to the next level.
And I know this may be of some benefit to a lot of startups and entrepreneurs that are considering doing venture building. And that is, how do you go about setting your goals so that they're realistic, but at the same time are bold enough that it stretches you? How did you, Jake Lane, go about setting your goals and align them with your vision?
For goals. So, I think a lot of businesses will enact or use the OKR kind of format of goal setting for the organization. You can use that all the way down to, personal goal setting and everything else. There's so many different ways to set your goals, but I'm a big fan of the micro goals because I get distracted quick when I have a big goal set in front of me, and I think it's daunting when you have a massive goal in front of you. Say you're trying to make $1 million this year, right? Well, what's the first step to getting to $1 million, and what's the process there? Break that down in micro goals, and it becomes a lot more achievable in your brain than it is if you just say, I want to get $1 million, right? And so I try and set those micro goals to be successful.
Excellent. And needless to say, there are so many different varieties of entrepreneurs. There's no such thing as these are the characteristics of an entrepreneur. And we're seeing finally more and more women and more minorities coming into the entrepreneurial space. But would you rather work for the boss or be your own boss, I guess is the more correct way of saying it. Great way to look at opportunities for you to survive, and that is consider the entrepreneurial space. We've gotten to that point in our podcast where we get to do fun questions. So we're going to take a pause right here, and we will be back in just a few. And we're back with our episode, and I'm Tony Alvarado, former executive in residence at the Bill Munday School of Business, and I am here with Jake Lane, one of our outstanding entrepreneurs. And we're now at that point in the podcast where we're kind of wrapping things up with fun questions, sort of like a speed dating round. Jake, not going to give you a lot of time to answer, and then we're going to move on to the next question. And if for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable answering the question, and just say pass, and we'll move on to the next question. And then we'll have some final words, takeaways, if you will, from you to the audience. That I expect that demographic will be St. Edward's University students. Are we ready, Jake?
Let's do it.
All right. Fun question number one, and then remember, kind of rapid fire. What's your favorite food?
I'm easy. I love a good steak.
And where would you go to get that favorite steak?
Oh, man.
Austin, Houston, San Antonio?
I'd have to stick around Austin. There's some Truluck's has a solid steak. Also, Eddie V's is always good.
Excellent. I could ask this question and the next question in terms of what movie, what book, what program, what streaming channel, what music, song, etc. But I'm just going to stick to a couple. What's the latest movie you've seen?
John Wick 4, because it's John Wick. I don't have any other explanation.
All right. And what program, podcast do you listen to more than others that you find useful in your line of work or for entertainment or for whatever reason?
I'm funny. I'm actually a big Crime Junkie podcast guy, so I try and get out of the work mindset a little bit and jump into that. So big fan of that and listen to that a lot on the car rides home.
I love it. If you want to bear your humanity a little bit and basically say, what experience or thing not commonly known about you would you be willing to share that is humorous, funny, or surprising, knowing that your spouse is probably going to listen to this and you don't want to go there, Jake? What would it be?
Oh, I don't know if I have something that I can just rapid fire off like that.
All right.
Oh, I don't think I do. I think this is going to be the one I'm
all right. You get a pass. You get a pass on it. Before we started our podcast, I told you that in the post-production, we'll probably have some royalty-free music that we'd put on here. But if we could afford the royalties and pay the copyright fees, and we wanted to put a song to this podcast, which is episode A2 featuring Jake Lane, what song would you choose that we could put onto this podcast?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. I have to go with something probably from Eric Church.
All right. You're an Eric Church fan. Excellent. Takeaways like a student to consider after listening to this conversation with all the limitations that Ma, the podcaster, unfortunately brought to the table. We could have probably gone in different directions, but what, if you could think of like top 3 takeaways from this conversation, and perhaps we didn't even get into the specifics of them, what would they be, Jake?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me is especially for those that are listening to this and maybe thinking about their journey is making sure that you're not seeking perfection. Search for good enough and really focus on launching what you feel is going to move the needle. The biggest regret you'll have is just not doing it and looking back and being upset with yourself. And then, one thing that I think is big is saying, hey, I'm not everybody needs to jump into owning their business right off the bat. I think there's a lot to be said about being in the entrepreneurship department and understanding each, I'll call facet of each, level of business that you're going to, whether it's finance, accounting, marketing, and understanding that and translating that into being a really, really solid team player in an organization and understanding how to work, cohesively across the organization. And then taking that and all that you've learned and the failures and going and building something that you feel is better. So I think that's the big takeaway for me.
Somebody wanted to contact you and wanted to know more information. I will certainly put the LinkedIn information in the script at some point. But for those that are just listening and won't be going on to a website to look at the script, how do they contact you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think my handle is just Jake Lane. I think I lucked into that one. And or you can go to jakelanemedia.com.
Thank you, Jake. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you, and every time that I visit with you, I learn something new about you. And all I can say is we are very proud at St. Edward's University, Bill Munday School of Business, of Jake Lane, entrepreneur. Until next time, thank you very much.